I never got that good.
Ladies loved it, Laurent. It was, dude, if you wanna know how to pick up chicks in Vermont, speak Latin to them.
Yes.
So speaking of life in a matrix where the rest of the real world doesn't exist, segue kind of worked.
Hamas and more.
LeBron, would you like to share your thoughts on simulation theory? Because one of my favorite ways of explaining this particular space of conversation is that I was able to slightly alter the perspective of someone who has 2 PhDs in regards to simulation theory using Rick and Morty references. So we'd love to hear your current perspective on the matter.
So, in other words, the whole debate about whether we live in a simulation? Is that what you mean?
Yeah, let's just go generally that.
Yeah, I do remember us having the conversation. But I don't think my position changed very much. Like, it still just doesn't make sense to me. It feels like Occam's razor. We don't need to add an extra level to suggest that we live in a simulation. I mean, and of course we can't. It's one of those things that can't be proven that we don't. But I just don't find it compelling.
I think simulation theory, and Justin, you can correct me if I'm wrong. It's more of a statistical argument than anything else. It's like Moore's law.
It wasn't originally, but in the last few years, it gained a lot of traction, largely because of largely because Elon Musk said something about it on Twitter. But like if we're being honest, that's really why people care about this. I love it and I hate it. But anyway, but I mean, even before that, guys like Nick Bostrom, right, were popularizing this. So good ideas coming from Oxford there.
And that's what I was thinking of Bostrom's argument. But
Bostrom's argument is largely a statistical one, though, right? Like it's the most likely scenario is that we do live versus that we don't live in a simulation.
Yeah, I don't buy it. It feels theological to me.
It does feel kind of theological to me as well, that like it's a faith-based argument that we live in a simulation to an extent, right? And here's where I think, Laurent, here's where you and I break.
Okay.
Is that I think that if we're framing it, right, that is to say that like we exist, right? This is an existential argument about the simulation, that we exist in some sort of like digital universe. Or computational universe. Mm-hmm. On the one hand, there might be very good reason to believe that our universe itself is computational, if not electrically digital, right? And we're going to put a pin in that and we can come back to it. Because the more immediate argument is that the very existence of platforms like social media and like Topia and like what we're doing now with a lot of places in the metaverse suggests that there already is a universe that is simulated in which a lot of our existence already takes place. It's just that it is not a universe that's greater than our computer. It's one that we have the God view of. Mm-hmm. Right? We look down into social media and we can tinker with it and we can play with it and we can control things here and there. Mm-hmm. Or at least that's the way we think of it. But in reality, it's much larger than any one of us. But we kind of go into this simulated universe in order to have that. And then the thing is we come out of it, right? So part of our existence actually does take place in a simulated digital world.
Yeah, sure.
So, and to that extent, actually, I'm increasingly thinking that the simulation argument is one that, even in the sense that Bostrom means it, is misguided. Because it really, if it's looking at human existence from an existential point, we're already doing that, and we built the simulation, right? So mystery solved.
Yeah, so can we distinguish, Justin, between the universe being computational and being digital? Because depending on what you mean by computational, I would agree it's computational, but I don't see a reason to believe that it's digital. And then the second point is the fact that if we're going to go metaphysical here, which I'd love to do, I think in a metaphysical sense, everything that exists is simulacra, is simulating in simulation. In other words, that there is no, in a Platonic sense, Plato downgraded the simulacra as false copies of the models of the ideal forms. So this whole idea that there is an ideal model that we're trying that to be more or less like it, to resemble it, to participate in it, is to have more existence. The whole Platonic approach. That's undone by, I think, the whole shift in philosophy in the last. Kind of started with Kant, but more in the 20th century. That privileges, that gets rid of that whole distinction between models and copies, and says all that exists is simulacra, is particles that are information, if you want to put it that way, bits that are interacting in increasingly complex ways through the emergence of complexity. So if that's what you mean by computational and informational, if that's your metaphysics, it's not just that we're in a simulation. All that exists is simulacra.
So I love that distinguishment between digital and what's the other word that you initially used?
Computational.
Computational. And so we talked previously about the video trying to imagine the 10th dimension. And in the beginning of that video, it talks about the theoretical construct of a point. Because in dimensionality, you have a point, and then when you have 2 points, you have a line, and then 3 points, you have 3 dimensions. But the point itself is theoretical, because you can't actually have a 2-dimensional point. It's a single-dimensional point, which is theoretical. And so this notion of kind of going philosophical, I guess in the same lens, is the universe created consciousness to perceive itself. So to create those simulacra. If there's not consciousness in the universe, then does the universe exist?
Yeah, so I love where your mind's going there, and I kind of would push it with a slight deviation, right? I love the idea of thinking about it going from point to line, and that in the 2 dimensions, and then 2 dimensions to 3 dimensions, and you kind of get the cubes and the spheres and things like that. But then the reason I would deviate from that, and this kind of gets back to the idea that we're already partially existing in a simulation in social media now, is the idea that so much of nature is actually fractal. And the idea of a fractal is not just that it's self-referential, it's also interdimensional in the Euclidean sense, right? So you can have something that's not just 2 dimensions or 3 dimensions. You can have something that's 2.457 dimensions, or 3.18 dimensions, or 1.45 dimensions in fractal geometry, right? So the very nature of space within the non-Euclidean sense, when you take it into that fractal in space, you start to get things where you go, yes, and, right? So the whole idea is well, do we exist in a simulation or not? You kind of go, yes, and, you can say yes or no, and then you can say yes we do to an extent in the social media world. So regardless of whether or not it exists in an ultimate reality in a Platonic sense, we can still say that at the next level we do. But I think, though, that this gets to this second mirroring, though, right? To kind of go right to Laurent's thing. In physics these days, right, there are people that are looking at the physical systems as information processing systems. So the idea that we have to think of the computational space and the digital space as separate really is only a difference of the tool, right? You can compute without the digital computer. We had computers before the modern processor. So we can't actually separate computational and digital in the hard sense. If our universe is in fact computational in the simulation sense, it is surely not digital in the sense of a CPU or a GPU, or probably even a quantum computer as we would conceive of it today.
Right. Can I also throw in the issue, the psychological level? So in a sense, I'm simulating this screen in front of me, and I simulate my experience of you, and you simulate your experience of me, and I simulate the future. How's the rest of this discussion about safe sex going to go? Under what conditions, with which variables, and so forth. So all of perception, all of human and animal, I suppose, perception is itself simulating. And so it's not just that we exist in a simulation, our entire experience is simulating.
It is, I think, tracking back to what Justin said about the partial dimensionality. So that video, I've watched that video so many times, and you just made it harder for me to understand. But there's
a documentary on Netflix called "Clouds Are Not Spheres." Goes right to it as well. Put that on the list. You'd love it.
Clouds are not spheres.
Exactly. Okay. Yeah, it's on Netflix right now.
So, talking about like this notion of is it this or is it this, and the answer is often yes. You also bringing up the conversation of quantum, right? Like being yes and no at the same time.
Yeah.
Or being yes to multiple things at the same time, and then you get this conversation of self-referential. So as Laurent said, right, our experience as we see it through our eyes and ears and other senses is in our brain simulating our perception of reality. And collectively, you could say that each individual simulation of reality comes together to create a simulation of society, which is a collective sensing, similar to how ants communicate with scents and chemicals. So in the construct of the Matrix series, how does that bridge between?
I see the value or why I fell in love with The Matrix in 1999. It's still my favorite movie of all time. I watched it like 7 times in the theater, which is something I'd never done before of any movie.
How many?
Wow. 7, yeah, which was a lot for me. But I've never watched any other movie more than once. But to me, it's not just the psychological and kind of metaphysical, but the sociological dimensions of it. So the idea that we are all, we actually are in a matrix, in the sense you're describing, Brian, a shared, produced, simulated image of norms that are appropriate, of gender roles, of political structures, of states, of nation states, and so forth, of how I should or shouldn't act, and to try to fit in, and so forth. And so related to that, if I can ramble about one other thing, just to throw it in the mix here, I see the arguments such as Bostrom's and others as anthropomorphic. And what I mean by that is, yes, human beings have anthropomorphic meaning, projecting onto something that's not human, the form of humanity. So projecting onto cloud a face, right? Seeing faces in the clouds, or projecting onto animals that they have emotions in the same way humans do, for example. So yes, we simulate. Yes, we create Facebook Utopia. Yes, we have images that we perceive and simulate and participate in them in this ways. But how you get from that to projecting onto the ultimate absolute condition for all existence in our universe, being a simulation, that's a theological leap that's, in my view, grounded in anthropomorphism. It's projecting onto the universe as a whole the capacity and desire and interest in simulating something.
So this is one of the more fun conversations, because it is one of those topics where Laurent and I actually disagree, I think. And so it's a rare find.
It is a rare find.
It's so rare, but this is one of those where I think it is, because I actually think that when you are looking at physical systems of the universe, you are seeing remnants of computational systems in a way that is very reminiscent of something that suggest a computational simulation space.
You don't think of design. You wouldn't use the word design, would you, Justin?
I wouldn't use the word design, but I also wouldn't not use the word design.
But why not just use? But
yes, dude, I want to start doing that now.
But let me ask you this, Justin. What can you get with words like design that you can't get with emergent complexity?
Nothing.
Exactly. So why add a word? Right. So why add the word design, which brings in all kinds of theological and imperfections?
Well, that sounds like the listener's baggage, not mine. But why rule it out? Why rule it out?
You can't rule it out. I mean,
No,
it could be that God created the world, or that Cthulhu did, or the spaghetti monster did. There's no way to rule it out. But then you're back to plausibility arguments.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that when it comes to the simulation argument, that the idea of the plausibility of one being a designer is a second order concern. The first order concern would be, is it in fact a simulation? And then the second one would be, to what extent can we then identify a designer of that simulation? There's not necessarily a situation to suggest that there are conceivable ways of thinking of it without a designer, that it is a happenstance of a simulation. Right there, so there are ways of doing it, but that's a question that I think is a secondary question. That's not important unless you can answer the first one in the affirmative.
Then you know what, Justin, this may be really disappointing that we've now narrowed even further the range of our disagreement. Because if you're saying that you can use the word simulation of the entire universe in a way that does not imply or necessitate a simulator, then of course that's my basic metaphysics, that simulation happens.
I think that could be a possibility, right? But I also think that if we get to the point where we could affirmatively say that it is in fact a simulation, I would err on this side of saying that it is most likely the fact that there is a simulator. Until you can rule out that or show that the sort of the possibility space is so large that is the least likely option. Yeah. It's similar to like the idea of like non-carbon based life, right? Or non-biological life. Like, it is possible that the criteria for life are met inside of stars, right? That things can have the fecundity and fidelity and replicability that we need to define life, and that it's something that could even have
I'm open to that.
Inputs and outputs of information, and that life exists at inside of stars, because you have the complexity and the energy needed in the free energy needed to define biological life. Yeah. So if that's the case,
does that same argument suggest that a star is itself life?
Perhaps. So Stephen Hawking actually raised that exact question, right? At one point, and so I think that's an interesting question. Nailed it. Well, you are both sitting, so that we've got two things going for you there.
But Dustin, can we go back to the first order question?
Yeah, I think so.
Because when you say it is a simulation, under what conditions would it be possible to know that it, I assume you mean the universe, is a thing that fits into the category of simulations? What evidence and what stance would you need to take in order to warrant such a claim?
Well, so one of the things I think that we would need to show, right, is that we can not only identify, points A and points B, right? That is to say, the universe and a simulation. We would also need to demonstrate mechanisms of correspondence between, the observable universe and the theoretical simulation that explains that universe. Exactly. And if in fact that theory is correct, then that correspondence should be effectively one-to-one at every level, right? Ideally, right, that's the perfect theory. But falling short of that, though, right, like understanding that you need to chop down the tree before you build the table, sort of a thing. How can you get to sort of the next stage there, right, is looking for patterns in the known universe where we actually do see some correspondence with a simulatable system, right? Some sort of thing that suggests that the system that we exist in is simulatable. Now,
but wait, Justin,
but
Justin, just to be so we don't lose track of the discussion. What do you mean by simulatable? Evidence of a simulation?
So I would say, so evidence that some of the most fundamental physical structures of the universe, the rules under which our universe exists, should correspond to computable rules at those levels. So, for example, right, there are Leonard Susskind's work on black hole information paradoxes, I think, is a great example of this. Effectively, what he found is that the amount of information that you need to describe the black hole in 3 dimensions also exists on the event horizon So the volume is in 3 dimensions is equal to the information that's stored in 2 dimensions in the event horizon. That suggests that the very nature of the 3rd dimension of the black hole itself is actually something that is projected. And so that gave rise to the idea of the holographic universe, that actually in simple sort of like ones and zeros binaries of information, you can fully describe 3-dimensional objects in a 2-dimensional space. So that, for example, is one of these areas where you're starting to see information processing suggest that the complex amount of information that we're seeing from the perspective of general relativity, right, where space and time can be warped and described in these multiple dimensions into a black hole, you're seeing this at the level of an information theoretical perspective that could easily be computed.
Yeah, but you would agree, wouldn't you, that being computational, or being the capacity to process information and project, to use your analogy of the black hole, is not yet, or even necessarily, simulation.
No, not necessarily. But it is something that suggests that the fundamental rules of our physical universe that underlie what we perceive as the macro phenomena, that those are themselves rules that are giving rise to these simulated sort of structures. And there's another example.
Wait, but Justin, aren't you? If you say 2 simulatable structures, so the fact that something's simulatable doesn't mean it's the result of a simulation. But can I?
No, but it also doesn't mean it's not.
No, but it doesn't mean it's not the spaghetti monster either. So it doesn't get us anywhere.
Well, exactly. The thing is that no one has seen any evidence of a spaghetti monsters universe, right? So you're arguing an anti-creationist argument. You're not arguing that the universe exists. So don't argue the creator before you can argue the universe.
So, but if you're assuming there's a creation, I mean,
we have to assume the creation to assume a creator.
Right. So do we have to assume a simulation to assume a simulator?
See, now this is the fun thing, right? Like, do you have to assume one or the other, or does the evidence suggest one way or the other? Right? The creationist, or at least the intelligent designer, right, is saying that the overall complexity of biological life forms suggests an intelligent designer. And largely they've now been debunked. However, there are still the Francis S. Collinses of the world, right? Head of the NIH right now, who is an intelligent design proponent, who's suggesting that in the physical world, you see such miraculous work that it must be the hand of a creator can be seen there. And I mean, you saw the same in Einstein too, so not to throw Francis Collins under the bus. Einstein also said the same thing, right? With God does not play dice, as an argument against quantum physics. But as more and more evidence has been collected, more and more evidence is suggesting that quantum physics does have a lot of utility and use. Like, there's experimental ways of proving quantum physics. So the question, I think, becomes, right, can we ever create, is there a way that we could experimentally show that the universe is a simulation?
I think what I find interesting is that it seems that we've already agreed that the universe is a simulation. We're just arguing about the definition. And because the universe is experienced by, we'll say, conscious beings, to be as broad as possible, and us conscious beings who are in this conversation are perceiving the world around us, and as we perceive it, those, as Laurent said, simulacra create the simulation in our own individual minds, and then collectively we have agreed upon simulations like, hey, this is air we're breathing. That is a collective simulacra. And so with that, you have a collective simulation. So it doesn't seem to me to the choice of whether or not there's a creator doesn't seem necessary in the conversation that we're having. It seems that we all agree that a simulation exists.
I think we do agree, actually, Brian. I think we do. So, like, if it's the universe simulating itself, or simulacra emerging into levels of complexity of increasingly complex simulations.
It sounds to me like this concept, Laurent, that you're talking about, like it's simulating itself. I understand that, especially if you think about it from the perspective of fractals and how fractals work. That makes sense. But the question I have is like, what the heck does consciousness have anything to do with it? Like, I find that like this focus of like involving consciousness and the requirement of consciousness, like I don't think consciousness is required to validate reality. I find that to be like kind of anthropocentric, viewpoint.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And so like, yeah. I'm wondering what's the opposite?
Agree.
What's the inverse of that? Of like making it necessary that consciousness has to be there in order for reality to be valid.
Yeah, I completely agree, Elise, and I think Justin earlier correctly called me out on something. He knows me well enough to know my own projections. So when he said earlier that what I was saying was in the mind of the hearer, meaning me, he knows my kind of allergy to projecting intentionality or consciousness as the cause of something that we don't need to do, that we don't need to do that for. So that's I agree with your point there, Justin, and defer to your analysis of my own tendencies. But then I think we're actually pretty close. All four of us now. We do believe that the world, in some sense, simulatable, and obviously simulation exists now. It's right. We're talking in a simulation right now, and simulatable, the conditions for computational and increasingly complex simulations emerge through the history of the evolution of life. And then and so if that's all we mean by we live in a simulation, I think we're all agreed that we do. But what makes the Matrix interesting to me, what makes the Matrix interesting, is not the metaphysical stuff, even though that is interesting, but the sociological stuff, which brings us back to like the topic of our conversations here, or the theme, practicing safe sex. Like, we're not supposed to talk about what happened in the fourth Matrix, so,
or at least not the end.
Not the end, but
spoilers.
But I think I could at least say, just sticking with the first three, there's the whole question: how do human groups form together, and how do machinic, artificially intelligent, sentient groups form together in ways that reinforce their own in-groupishness and lead to war and conflict, and if you're in the Matrix, you're buying into the sociological rules and norms that are guiding your life without being free. If you break out, I see the Matrix as a kind of encouragement to reflect on the extent to which you've bought into what Brian was earlier referring to as the shared simulations of our world.
So, not to make too many abstractions, so building on that, okay, so we all agree that we are living in a simulation of our own minds and to some degree of society. We've kind of put aside this conversation about a creator or intelligent designer for the moment. So looking down rather than up, so instead of the cosmos, looking at, like, let's say a lesser, not to be discriminatory, a being that has the ability to see what we would perceive as fewer dimensions, so something like an ant, or perhaps since Laurent and Justin, you both simulate human beings in a simulated reality today. Your simulated reality is a collection of artificial agents. Now, these agents are not sentient, but they're based on morals and principles and rudimentary behaviors. And those rudimentary behaviors enable you to predict with astonishing accuracy what sentient human beings would do. And so, Laurent, I've made the case to you before, if they believe that they are real, and they do not have any exterior perspective to be able to compare their experience of reality with we'll call it a higher dimensions, a higher dimensional being's perception of reality, then who's to say it's any less real than the one that we experience?
I would completely agree, but I would go further and apply that not just to the agents in our simulations, but to other human beings even. Like, how can like, we don't know what other people perceive and what they experience. We don't, or animals. We don't know what it's like to be a bat, for example, to use the famous example. So if in fact the agents in our simulations are conscious, then they would have their own experience, and wouldn't be aware of necessarily, or at least have the same access to the next dimension that we're in, watching them.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because this actually does come back to some of the things that people are discussing currently in physics, right? When you're looking at like the Anthropic Principle, and the idea that our very understanding of the universe is bound by the fact that we exist in a universe in which we exist, right?
Precisely. Yes.
So a simulated individual or an agent inside of our simulations is only ever going to be able to understand their simulated universe because that's the only one that they exist in. They're not aware of any other simulation, just like we're not aware of any other universe. So understanding the universe in terms of a potential multiverse, for example, would be really what's needed, I think, in order to definitively say anything useful about whether or not we exist in a simulation. Now, that being said, you need to have a simulation that understands that it's not the only simulation.
Exactly.
In order to try and show that. Now, the issue is that we've done this to an extent, but the way that we do this is by utilizing within our simulation systems, right? When we test them by running these scenarios tens of thousands of times if we need to, and then we utilize new AI systems that go over all of that data because it's oftentimes too complex to just kind of sort it out in our own heads. So we utilize AI systems that are just there as analysts, if you will, where the analyst goes over all of the different simulated possibilities that we've simulated in the initial simulation set, right? So between us and those being simulated, there is an analyst level AI that we've employed. I guess it's now been, what was it? I guess the first time we did this, Laurent, was what? The digital twin of London? So this was like, what, 3-4 years ago?
Mm-hmm.
It was originally we worked on it with Saiku Diallo and Yvonne.
I forget what we called that, but it was a chapter in the book on human simulation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so there's even been so it's even been written about, but we've done this multiple times as well. And it's something that I use now as standard practice when we do a simulation, is we run an AI system over that simulated data in order to better understand the simulations themselves. So that AI, to an extent, because it has access to the information and from lack of our conscious, to use a
Oh, I've lost Justin's audio. I don't know if you guys can still hear me.
It seems that he has momentarily exited the simulation.
Yeah. Where did he go?
I've got a
I was just ready to go down there.
I've got a pretty cool little discourse happening in my Reddit chat about like the validity of consciousness. It's pretty fun. It's pretty fun. I like this. They're enjoying the conversation, definitely.
Yeah, maybe read some of them, or
okay, sure.
Summarize.
So it all started with Cumsock Bandit says consciousness isn't real; it's only ego, which I thought was interesting, and I think that's kind of related to like the point that I was making, that it's kind of like egotistical for us to like only talk about this conversation from the perspective of consciousness, or from our experience, because like, I don't know, I feel really uncomfortable saying that like some kind of reality or some kind of
it's the anthropomorphism problem,
yes.
at least that you and I were both highlighting earlier.
Yeah. So what I was curious is like, what's the inverse on that? Like, what's the opposite of that? Like, how could we take a different perspective at that angle?
You mean to avoid being overly anthropomorphic?
Yeah.
Well, I'm not sure if this is the kind of if I'm logging on completely, at least, so tell me if I'm missing.
Okay.
But here's how I my first response to that would be that I think this is what scientific training helps people learn to do to become less anthropomorphic. So for example, if you're studying chemistry and something strange happens in your test tube, then if you were to say, well, I think it was a spirit or a ghost that caused it, well, you would fail chemistry, right? So science forces you to come up with a non-anthropomorphic, that you can't appeal to hidden agents in an explanation in science. And as science becomes increasingly influential in the social matrix in which we live, I think people are pushed more and more to become less anthropomorphic. But it's a really, for evolutionary reasons, at least, it's a really difficult bias to overcome, because in fact, to survive, we need to be able to detect other, if I can just keep using the word, other conscious beings or other human faces, and we need to be able to know if they're enemies or friends or potential mates or caretakers, or we need to quickly, our brains evolve to quickly search for and guess that they're there and try to figure out what they're thinking and feeling. So it's very difficult to stop anthropomorphism and to stop projecting consciousness onto everything.
Yeah. What if we realize that consciousness is a wider concept than just how we experience it as humans? That
Yeah, this is hinting at something that Justin didn't quite go down this particular bunny trail, but he was kind of hinting around it earlier. That a view, like the most extreme view, would be what's called panpsychism, the philosophical view that everything is conscious. Oh, Justin's back. Yeah,
I am.
And so I don't think like that stars are conscious or that quantum phenomena are conscious, but there may very well be living, depending on how you define an open system, input of energy and so forth. But and then of course the way the word consciousness can be used so differently, it can be used of the entire arena of human experience, into which everything, like that's how Buddhists talk about it. Everything that happens just appears in our consciousness, or you can be more or less conscious of something, with meaning more aware or self-aware. I'm not sure what your the person on Reddit was referring to, but the ego, I think, appears in consciousness.
I think that it's one of those fun words that we can do without entirely. There's a really interesting book actually that was written by Daniel Wegner, called The Illusion of Conscious Will, and it's pretty controversial. I think it came out in like 2004, 2005 or something like that. And it's this entire book written about the scientific explanation for consciousness as basically a delusion that we all have. And there's a lot of examples that are very common throughout the world that complicate the idea of consciousness itself, such as like phantom limb syndrome, for example, where you're experiencing a conscious phenomena, but it obviously does not exist, right, in a phantom limb patient. You see it the same in like dissociative identity disorder or schizophrenic auditory hallucinations. But then there's also a lot of like interesting ones where you see this in sort of like normal things that happen throughout the world, right? In people who speak in tongues, people who are going into trances, or people who are under hypnosis. There's a lot of ways to manipulate the very idea of consciousness, to the point that I think it kind of calls into question the usefulness of the term. And really, it's kind of like, Laurent, I think like what you were saying, it really has to do with reflection. Like, how much are we reflecting on something?
Yeah, and it's just it's such a fuzzy term. But since we're running out of time, Justin, right before you dropped out, I really wanted to go down a particular rabbit hole. So can I go down it with you?
Gödel's incompleteness theorem.
No. This is
okay.
This is a rabbit hole that I don't know if anyone else has ever thought of going down. It just popped into my head while you were talking. So back to artificial society, right? So let's just imagine. Let's just call him Justin, okay? We have a simulated agent in an artificial society with however many hundreds of thousands of agents with all these variables. and then we run, let's just say, 1,000,000 simulations in which Justin is present in every one of those simulations, right? And now we have all the data, the output, all the data, and the complex possibility space of all those simulations in the multidimensional space in which Justin is embedded within all of them. Now then, would there be a way? And here's the rabbit hole. Would there be a way to make to make Justin the center of the state space, the multidimensional state space of all the simulation experiment outputs, and then revolve, if I can use that as an analogy, I mean metaphorically, revolve the state space around Justin as the center, so that Justin can see every possible multidimensional path revolving around him, every possibility in every dimension in every direction.
So we had a question a bit ago, which I think ties into this, from Bull to the Face. Bull to the Face asks, do you think that people come into contact with alternative simulations within their lifetime? And the response was, on the basis of what's been discussed in this conversation, it seems yes. The universe, as we know it, is created from our perceptions. So if we create new perceptions, then we could say that we create a new simulation or new universes. And so the way that you're kind of using the higher dimension to look at all of the possibilities that include Justin, for the sake of seeing like how Justin has an effect, which requires that higher dimension of being able to see. Yes, but it's, again, you get into that, like, if you can think it, then you have simulated it. If you can get other people to think it, then you have made that simulation grow.
It's funny.
Your processing power.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of funny to think about how that even happens, right? In the very nature, in the very way in which what we would call consciousness arises, right? To an extent, right? In the multi-simulation space, right? All of those individual agents exist in simulations that are kind of encapsulated, quite literally, right? A lot of simulation work that's done today is done in Java and has significant threading issues, right? You have to run one simulation per core, and a lot of what people are doing in social simulation, right? We have ways of getting around that to do the big ones, which are fun, but generally speaking, most people are isolating each simulation computationally. So the agents in one simulation don't have access to the agents in another simulation. They can't, right, have any access to that information. So the information that would exist in a parallel simulation to the universe of our own would presumably be encapsulated in terms of information. That's interesting, I think, to me, when I go back to like how we create multi-agent AI systems, because we look at the mind as a modular system, right? We have different information processing modules that are basically like functions, right? We have different information that's input, and then those modules do different things, and then it outputs some sort of behavioral or other new information about someone's beliefs or their cultures or their values or their memory or what have you. The original way that philosophers defined modularity, right? This goes back to Jerry Fodor's like Crises of Modularity of Mind, was that it is information encapsulated. So the same way in which parallel universes would be hard for us to discern from a modular point of view, the individual way in which our mind thinks about things are also very information encapsulated. And there's a lot of ways in which if our mind is doing one thing, right, we can't just immediately throw information and start thinking about something else, right? So, and this is one of the reasons why consciousness appears to be an illusion. Like we just see it happening in our own thing, and we prescribe authorship of our actions to ourselves, and therefore we say that we were conscious of what we were doing because we know that we did it. But in people who don't have that ability to reflect psychologically, that nature of consciousness goes away. Now building that, though, using that to build the individual consciousness is one thing, but then going from consciousness to consciousness across different simulated universes brings up sort of like these two paradoxes in a way. One of them, of course, being the in a way, like going back full circle, I was hoping we would mention something about Gödel's incompleteness theorem, and we kind of can, right? No one can understand the entirety of a system in which they are a critical part.
Yes, and Justin, and that's where I was going earlier when I asked you what you mean by it is a simulation, because you'd have to break Gödel's incompleteness theorems to make such a claim.
Or you would have to rise above the very nature of a universe or a unitary universe. It would have to be a multiverse situation, which your multi-simulation approach also gets to. What's interesting, though, is that you then refer to that agent, right, as a Justin. And this becomes something that's interesting. Are each one of those Justins a single Justin?
It's a
and
great
if
question.
So, did you not just create your own ship of Theseus kind of version that breaks down and suggests that Platonic forms actually do exist?
That there is a Justin.
Call back on Platonic forms.
yes. No, a very good point. And actually, as I was falling down the rabbit hole, that occurred to me. So almost logically, what I was proposing couldn't possibly happen.
Not unless there is some sort of meta-simulated formal version of a thing.
Yeah,
that would be simulated in multiple different simulations.
I totally agree.
But then, right, what's to say that that formal thing does not exist at a level of something that is simulatable, in which case what we have is a simulation and then projected variations of that form into lower level simulations. Right, in which case it doesn't have to be a form in the Platonic sense. It's just that you have this thing that is being simulated and then multiple variations of it. Much in the way, right, that when we make a statement about a multi-agent AI system of like a policy or a city or whatever it is that we're doing, right, we're making a statement that this is how the system behaves based on an abstraction of the different statistical probabilities and distributions of our observations over tens of thousands of different microsimulations that are all under slight variations in terms of the environment and the key variables that we're looking at. But the agents are more or less free to make their own decisions within that simulation at any different point of space and time in their own simulation. Right, so we actually do observe exactly this paradox in our own simulation work today.
Yeah.
Bull to the face says, Justin pushing Justin up the hill and rolling back down.
Every day, dude, every day. I like that guy.
Well, Laurent, I think you have a scheduling obligation after this, and as do we. So we will be back.
This has been a good one, though.
It's been a
This has been one of my favorites ever.
Mine too.
I think this is like one of the first times you two have agreed while we were or disagreed while streaming.
It makes it more fun.
We'll have to brainstorm offline about other things that Laurent and I disagree about.
Yes, that's a good strategy.
We'll have to have a neutral party in between, so that you don't know what the conversation is, so that we Well, okay, so we'll work on that. For those who are tuning in, join us next week, whatever time it is for you. It'll be an hour prior to now, at least from today, or 11 a.m. Pacific time every Wednesday. And I'll drop a link in the chat before turning off the stream. Thanks so much for joining us, Justin, Laurent, Elise. Fantastical.
It's been awesome, guys.
Yep, see you next week.
And brain scratchers, and yeah, if anyone wants to jump in, there might be some people that stick around, and
cool.
Thank you so much.
See y'all.
Bye.
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 Let's see. Oh, I'm following Laurent. I gotta go my own way. I can't just follow Laurent. I gotta go my way. Alright, well that was cool. It was cool. That was a very cool experience. Simulations. That was a lot to take in. I don't know. That was a nice rabbit hole to go down. The guy, so Justin and Laurent are both incredible speakers, and they are both incredibly intelligent and have very interesting experience, working in technology and engineering, algorithms, social algorithms. They're not just computer scientists, they're also like philosophers and sociologists and such. So please come back. You can give me a follow I stream this conversation every week, so it's every Wednesday at 11 a.m. It usually lasts for an hour, and for future reference, any of y'all, Succulents Sunrise, if you want to join us next week and like be a part of that metaphysical simulation, you can just come to this link. It's a browser base, recommended from your computer. There it is, topia.io/citizens. You can come to that link from a Chrome browser. That's like the most ideal technology. You don't have to download anything. And you can actually be a part of the conversation, ask questions, contribute. Everybody is welcome. It's inclusive. They even let me be around. I have interest in these things, but definitely no direct experience. But any question is valid. I did see quite a few more questions coming through Reddit. I was not able to share them with the group, but thank you so much for y'all's engagement and participation in this conversation. It was a lot of fun. I look forward to doing it again, seeing y'all again. Again, my name is Elise. I am a streamer. I stream regularly here. Lots of different types of content. Most of it is dealing in civility, kindness, neighborliness, all those things. And simulation. Simulation is definitely a part of that. Oh, thank you, Mr. Mars. I'm glad you like the house. All right, Reddit, I'm going to say goodbye. I'll be seeing you on Friday evening, Best Life Friday. We do a pretty cool deep dive into a topic of what we can learn to live better lives for ourselves. So yeah, give me a follow. Come back Friday night. I'll see you all around. Bye, Reddit. Yeah, Mr. Mars, thank you. Yeah, this is my holiday. This is my holiday-themed house, nice and warm and cozy. I got Bitcoin in my lap. Can't ask for anything more. But yeah, Mr. Mars, I think I'm gonna be ending the Twitch stream. Don't have much going on other than just watching the snow outside. It's really beautiful. Mr. Mars, how are you doing today? How are you doing today? Who's this? Hey, Sizzle is still nice. It's noon already. I guess, we started this at 11, so that makes sense. Oh, we have 3 people here. Maybe we should do a little raid. Any friends on? Fake Fakery. Let's go raid Fake Fakery. It's been a while since we've hung out with them. Rain Reclamation. Bacon McGriddles. I'm not a horticulturist. I'm a food scientist, unfortunately, although I'm very interested in horticulture. I think it's a damn shame that I didn't learn more horticulture, because I studied food science. We, shared a lot of similar coursework with horticulturalists. But ultimately, the whole field is so siloed. It's like everything post-harvest on. That's like what I academically studied. Now, when I joined the Peace Corps and worked with farmers in West Africa, that's when I was like, fuck, man, I learned the wrong stuff. Like, yeah, I'm happy with what I learned about, like, processing food and cooking and, like, on a molecular level, how food works. But, we didn't learn about growing it. which I think is just absolutely ridiculous. So everything that I know about horticulture is just from experience, working with farmers. I think it's such a shame. That would be, maybe a legacy that I'd like to leave with the academic world. I don't think that my academic journey is done, but that would be, I think, something I'd like to inspire, is to integrate these different fields together that need to be together. You don't just join. You have to apply. The Peace Corps, I think, is inactivated right now because of COVID. But I think they still have their application open. It does take about a year from when you submit your application until you're actually deployed, because there are several rounds of interviews, and also you may, have to wait, or you like, there's a lot of actually releases, like medical release, psychological release, that you have to go through, and there can be speed bumps along the way. So that's why I say it takes about a year. So I recommend to anybody that's ever even thought about the Peace Corps, because of that long time period, I'd recommend that you just put the application in, and you can always say no. But the thing that sucks is if you decide, okay, yeah, I want to join the Peace Corps, I want to go in 6 months, like, it's not going to work like that. You still have to wait, like, that whole amount of time. So you might as well just start the application process, and then you can say no if you decide not to go. But the Peace Corps, the important thing to know about it is that ultimately it's like a Department of State program, and it is a diplomacy tool. It really is. Like, it's not a development tool. It's a diplomacy tool. So as, like, an agent of the state, you're a tool of diplomacy. You can agree with that or not agree with it, and ultimately you can participate in the program, contribute to people's lives, and not give in to being that tool of diplomacy. You can do it on your own terms and gain your own value out of it. But the Peace Corps, what it ultimately teaches you, if you choose to let it teach you, is how to listen. Oh, you joined the Army. Okay, yeah, so like the Army is the opposite of the Peace Corps. Not really a tool of diplomacy. But similar in that, you're an agent of the government to accomplish goals for the government. But I think that the Peace Corps is incredible. It is actually quite a competitive program to get into, which is another reason why it does take like a year to get through the process from application to deployment. Oh. Hey, bite my hot dog. Who are you? Who are you? You have a new name. I'm so sorry. I don't know who this is. Who is this? Who's the glizzy here? Who's the glizzy? Who's the glizzy? Oh yeah, this is Bitcoin. Yeah, he's a cutie. He's been cuddling in my... Oh, you angry that I got you up? He's like doing his little growling over here. Floofs. Little scritches. Yeah, he's a cutie. Hi. His name is Bitcoin, Bacon. His name is Bitcoin. I've had him for 8 years. I feel like I know you. You do know me. You're my core fan. Who are you? Who are you? You bite my glizzies. Yeah, it's highly competitive. The Peace Corps requires you to... Hey, welcome back, Armand. It requires you to have an undergraduate degree. If you don't have an undergraduate degree, then you need to have at least 4 years relevant experience for the field that you're applying for. Oh, she's fat and lazy. Yeah, he's lazy, but he's not fat. He's food motivated. Your mind playing trick on you? Okay. Anything we can do to refresh your memory about my glizzies? Yeah, so like if you wanted to go do agriculture work like what I did, then you would have to have at least 4 years experience like working on a farm. But yeah, I recommend the experience. There's 3 goals to the Peace Corps. The first one, who am I? I don't know. Oh, you have a camera mic for Topia? Do you want to come meet me in Utopia World? We can meet in Utopia World right now. If you want to check it out. I'll give you a different link. We can go to a different world. The tea house. This is the world that I helped build. The one I was just in. Oh, they're not glizzies? I'm sorry. I thought they were glizzies. Alright, come to this link. Topia.io/teahouse. You can meet me here. You're going to grow flowers. Great. That is awesome. Bacon, I think that's like a great idea for you. I think it's a great idea for you to do what brings you joy. And you know what I'm guessing is going to happen after you do that? You're going to realize that you don't really hate people. You know, you certainly could continue to enjoy your solitude. But maybe you won't hate people. We live in the same state, but we're far from each other. Oh, you're in Citizens now. No, go to the tea house one. Go to the tea house one. That one's more private. That one's my world. Go to the tea house. I know who you are. All I gotta do is like go through my list of core fans and see if you changed their name. Hey, Mr. Fix. Okay, so yeah, the 3 missions of the Peace Corps. The first one is to introduce American culture to other cultures, right? So me living there and talking about what it's like to be American, whatever, there's that part of it. And then the next goal is for American citizens to learn about other cultures. So that was when I learned, and then now I'm sharing the stories with you. And then the third goal is actual development. Hey Debbie, welcome in, good to see you. Hey Mr. Fix-It, hello. How are you today? Oh, interesting. Just think of trolls. Is this Diggle? No, I don't think Diggle poured yet. Okay, cool. Yeah, I'll send that to you, Debbie. Congrats on that, by the way. Fire Flames of Fire, welcome in, nice to meet you. Welcome to Pococha. Do I remember you? No. You're brand new, how can I remember you? Who is this? Wait. Alright. Yeah, but you know, like those 3 goals are nothing compared to the thing that I learned, which is how to listen. How to like remove yourself from your own biases and just listen. That is such a hard lesson to learn, and I think that's like the crux of the problem of a lot of oppression and marginalization that we're talking about in this country, of trying to bring justice to and bring clarity to. The problem is that people don't listen, especially people coming from, you know, positions of always being listened to, you know, for lack of a better word. I know it's a stigmatizing word people don't like, but privilege. Okay, so who are you, Fire the Flames? Who are your trolls in here? So I've got DJ Road Warrior, I got Groot, I got Pikachu. I mean, pretty much is everybody. Everybody's trolling. But you're back now, Fire Flames. Okay, so you left and then you've come back. Who is it, Ricky? The man? It's down? Oh, here you are. Hey, I see you. Okay, I'll come to you. I'll come to you. Hello. Hi, Armand. Nice to meet you.
I have to see you.
Can you see me?
Yeah, I see you.
Sweet. You see me in my log cabin?
Yeah.
Hey, Brian, what's up?
How is it work? Yeah, I just have a white screen.
Oh, you just have a white screen. So it's taking a while for your computer to load the graphics. Sometimes
Maybe my internet connection is not good.
Yeah, but sometimes if you reload the page, you know, that's all you got to do. So you can try to refresh and come right back.
Okay.
I still do this? Yeah, I'm still here. No one can bring me down. A fire flame singing hee hee. Fire flames, who are you? By my glizzies, who are you? You live far away. I don't know. You're like in Reno? Are you in Winnemucca? I don't know. Oh, Sergio. Okay, yeah, welcome back, Sergio. Good to see you. Welcome back. Brian, how are you doing this morning? Alright, is it better? Armand?
No. Yeah. The connection is not good though. How is it? No. Also, I don't have problems.
Yeah, everyone does big.
Oh, noise loading.
Alright, so you're a 1K core fan that loves Bitcoin.
So.
You just got back from Box Farms after Christmas with parents. Mental game planning for 22. Alright, Brian, wish you the best of luck. This is going to be the year. This is going to be the year for everybody. Yeah. Yeah, here, let me...
And this is you, yeah?
Yep, this is me.
Hmm?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Armand, so you live in Iran?
Yeah.
What do you do for your work?
I'm noting branding for new startups.
Oh, sweet. Nice. That's really cool. I like that. I do.
But it's different with international branding. You know, in Middle East and in Iran, Jordan Belfort and other things, it's not work. It's very different.
What do you think about live streaming, Armand, for branding? Is that why you're on Pococha? Like, how did you find Pococha, and what's your goal with doing Pococha?
From some personal branding is good.
Okay.
But for product branding is not good.
Why not?
I speak about for Iran location, you know.
I'm trying it out. So I have a startup. Arman, I have a tea startup. I mean, it's not so much a startup, it's a business I've been building for 10 years. But I represent small scale farmers around the world. I import their tea and distribute for them, and doing branding through their storytelling. So, you know, the story of how tea is made, who makes it, who are the people and the cultures behind it. So most of my business is wholesale. So when I'm doing live streaming, I'm not, you know, that's not my target audience. Oh, there's my Twitch. What was that? Hey, Ice-T Curtis. Thank you for the follow. Welcome in, Ice-T Curtis. I like your name. Feel free to say hello. So oh, this is my dog. He never can leave me alone.
Hi, cutie.
His name is Bitcoin. Yeah, his name is Bitcoin. Yeah, so I use streaming to, you know, like plant seeds and build the roots of all that storytelling. Thank you for the happy pinky.
I just opening live for first time in Pokucha.
Yeah, a few nights, or last night, or yesterday?
I'm just in for 2 days.
Okay.
Today is my second day.
I don't know who it is, Bite My Glizzies. I don't know. Pikachu, who the heck is this hot dog? Who's the hot dog? Oh, Ice-T Curtis, you're funny. I'm watching your videos now. Ice-T. Let's read your about. I'll give you a follow back. Iced tea comes with a variety of flavors you'll learn to love. He's not your typical gamer and doesn't necessarily play your typical games. So grab a glass, fill up, and come with some tea. Maybe this will quench your thirst. Thank you for your support. Cool, man. Hey, thanks for coming by, Iced Tea. Jersey Shore. Cool.
I use some technique like neuroscience, neuromarketing.
No science, you said?
Neuroscience or neuromarketing.
Normal marketing, like what is that? What's normal marketing?
Noro.
Noro.
N-O-R-O.
Noro.
Yeah.
Okay, I gotta look that up. I don't know what that means.
Wait for me.
Okay. Hey Adam, nice to meet you. My name is Elise. This is Bitcoin. Yeah, Pikachu, there's this hot dog person in here. They're my core fan, a 1K core fan. And I'm wondering, who is it? Yeah, Pikachu, here's your chance for a panda. Bite My Glizzy says that if you can figure out who it is, he'll give you a panda. Or she'll give you a panda.
I spell it N-E-U-R-O.
Oh, okay. Neuro. Okay, so
yeah.
like brain, like...
Yeah, sorry.
Okay.
It's okay. Neuroscience or neuromarketing.
Oh, interesting. Okay, cool. So kind of related to the topic we were talking about with those guys. It's a measurement of psychological and neurosignals to gain insights into customers' motivations, preferences, and decisions. Interesting. So do y'all do any like simulation work?
I don't know. So, 1 second, I can't listen to you, sorry.
Okay.
Yes, because I'm walking in the Tapia and I can't listen to you, sorry.
Okay, yeah, turn it down. Yeah, turn the stream down. Oh, you're not even in the stream.
Coming into your live in Poco-chan, okay?
Okay. Poco-chan. Poco-chan. Pikachu things are like, get those boxes. The boxes. Alright, I want to end this Twitch stream. I'm gonna end the Twitch stream. Oh, we got 4 people here, though. Hey, Ice-T, are you still here? Ice-T Curtis? You're interesting. I look forward to watching your stream. I'm not really a gamer. I play games on Tuesday nights. If you like gaming, come back on Tuesday night. But the rest of the time, I'm just drinking tea and talking with different people, talking about civility and kindness and goodness. Oh, it's okay, Armand. You speak well. Alright. Oh, yeah, we're gonna go raid. Let's go raid Fake Fakery. He's another tea friend who also hangs out on Kokocha. He talks about philosophy and stuff. Oh, he's looking at art. Let's just go raid. Let's go raid. Let's go raid. Let's go get him. Tea raid. Drop all your tea emotes if you got them. Your Bitcoin emotes. Oh, just one of y'all coming? Alright, let's go. Let's go raid. Let's go raid them. Bye, y'all.
Painting yet, but it